Hello, welcome to Tendoc Talks about the Power Rangers role-playing game. Today I wanted to talk about character builds. If you go through the origin and then later the role selection chapters of the book, you'll notice that certain Power Rangers have certain abilities, unique to them and their color on the spectrum. Yellow Rangers have the ability to attack 3 times. Blue Rangers have the ability to heal other Power Rangers. Red Rangers have the ability to boost the attacking strength of their power weapons. And of course, Green Rangers they eventually gain access to a shield around them that increases their toughness ability. And you might be looking at that and saying, man, I want to play a Red Ranger, but the ability to attack 3 times seems awesome. Or, I want to be able to heal and be a Black Ranger. Well, what if I told you that you could? You could be a Ranger that has all of those abilities. Stay tuned. In order to set up this build, you need to make sure that you have a complementary origin and a good base role to bring it all together. So let's assume you want to make a Power Ranger that has as many different powers from other Rangers as possible. Cross-classing isn't really a thing in this game, but there are things called grid powers. Much like feats in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, these give you special abilities and allow you to make use of certain circumstances that other players aren't allowed to or don't have access to at that time. And there's a couple of powers I want to bring up right away. There is a grid power called Hardened Armor. You can take it up to 3 times, and every time you take it, your toughness rating goes up by 1, making you harder to be hit by attacks that target toughness. You can take the Power Heal power, which allows you to expend power points and heal another target, just like a Blue Ranger. You have a Power Shield ability that you can take that gives you +2 toughness, just straight off the bat. Now this power is temporary, but it lasts for as long as you are morphed. And because the shield is actually physically there, you can give it to other people. So that one's pretty handy. You can take Power Strike, which is an ability that lets you spend up to 3 power points to add that much damage to a melee attack. If you miss it, you just waste the points. So, like a Red Ranger, except you don't have to focus it on a power weapon. You could use it on your fist if you wanted. You can also take Power Blast, which lets you spend up to 5 power points on an attack, but it modifies your throwing ability. And it's basically a Power Ranger Hadouken. And then there is the Relentless Blows power that allows you to attack 3 times, just like a Yellow Ranger, with a couple of differences. The first difference is that the Yellow Ranger's 3rd attack doesn't use their martial arts skill. They use a special die that levels up with them, and it starts at D2 and goes all the way up to D12 by level 20. But Relentless Blows is different. You can use your martial arts skill for every single roll, so in that regard, Relentless Blows is better. However, Relentless Blows specifies that you have to do the attacks unarmed, whereas the Yellow Ranger is allowed to use finesse weapons. So they could use their daggers for it. And all that really means is, by default, you do stun damage on martial arts, unless you take a downshift to do damage. The Yellow Ranger could just use their daggers. So it depends on which one you consider better, but they both cost 1 power point to do, so they are virtually the same in that regard. Now, any Power Ranger can take a grid power, So you could take a Red Ranger and give them Power Heal and give them Relentless Blows, and now you're a red, blue, yellow Ranger. And then throw on a Power Shield maybe and call yourself a green, and now you have all of their base powers and you're super good at doing a little bit of everything. The only drawback to this is how often you have access to powers. The first grid power you're allowed to take happens at level 6, the second at level 11, and the third at level 16. So you'd be very near the end of your Power Ranger career before you could get all of these powers at once. So that is one drawback. Now there is one way around this, because there is a perk that lets you take a grid power, but you can only take that perk once. However, in this build that I'm about to show you, you can take that perk immediately. Normally, you only get a perk at level 4, then level 8, then 12, then 16, then 19. But certain origins give you a perk right away. Now, your origins in this system are what kind of person you are. Kind, curious, rebellious, brainy, oddball, tragic. And honestly, I think they missed a good opportunity. They could have called these attitudes. You know, throwing back to Zordon saying, I need teenagers with attitudes. But instead they call it Origin. That's probably because this system is also going to be used for G.I. Joe and for Transformers. But what a missed opportunity. You could have a whole chapter on choosing your attitude as a teenager. But anyway, if you're going to set up a build to get as many grid powers as you can, there's really only one thing you can do. You have to either take the Curious Origin or the Oddball Origin. The reason is because both of them give you a perk right away. And with that perk, you are going to take the extra grid power perk that immediately lets you take a grid power, and as an added bonus, gives you 1 extra personal power point. So at level 1, you'd have 3, whereas most of the other Rangers would only have 2. So right away, you can take one of those grid powers I already mentioned. Power Healing, Power Shield, Power Strike, or Relentless Blows. Before you've even decided what role you're going to be. So you could take Relentless Blows, that basically gives you the ability to be a Yellow Ranger, and then take Red. Why would you do that? Because Red has access to heavy armor, giving him +4. So now you're hitting as hard as a Red Ranger, but as often as a Yellow Ranger. Or maybe you're a Black Ranger and you have the ability to give buffs to people. But because of your level 1 perk, taking grid power advantage, now you can take the Blue Ranger's power to heal. And you can spend as many power points as you want on Power Heal all at once to restore that many health to another Ranger. So in some ways, Power Heal and Power Strike, for instance, they both can be better than the abilities that they're based on. Because a Red Ranger, when he uses his version of Power Strike, he has to use a weapon. He can only spend 1 power point on it. And the amount of extra damage it does is dependent on his level. So for the first 5 levels of the game, he can only add 1 damage. By level 20, he can add up to 4. And it only costs him 1 power point, so don't get me wrong, that's still very good. But if you're trying to end a battle very quickly, use the Power Strike perk, because it lets you spend 3 power points immediately and do 3 extra damage at any level. So you're basically as effective as a level 15 Red Ranger at that point, but you do have to spend 3 times the power points to do it. I'm just saying you can do it, because by then you have something like 8 or 9 power points to spend. You do this 3 or 4 turns in a row, and whatever you're fighting is absolutely just going to evaporate, assuming you can hit it. So using these powers, you can be a Ranger of 1 color, but have the power of multiple other Rangers. Now, is this optimal play? Not necessarily. Because imagine being a Red Ranger with Power Strike, just leaning into your strengths. And then you get the Red Ranger extra damage plus the Power Strike extra damage, and by level 20, you could casually just do 7 extra damage, and that's without whatever weapon you're using, and without multiple attacks. That's huge. Or imagine being the Blue Ranger, where you could choose to do your class heal or power healing to give them more heals all at once. Because I think the way that the Blue Ranger heal actually works is you spend 1 power point, and then they get back 1d2 health. But if you need to heal them all the way right away, you could use this ability. Or imagine being a Green Ranger that has increased armor because of his ability, and then he takes Power Shield and gets even better. I didn't mention the Yellow Ranger because I don't think Triple Strike and Relentless Blows stack. But if they could, then that's like, what, 6 attacks every round? Every time you have an attack opportunity? So you could lean into your strength hard instead of compensating for your weakness. And that is a completely valid strategy. I'm just letting you know that if you wanted to, you could be a single color that has almost every other Power Ranger's abilities. So if you're interested in doing a build like that, we can go into greater detail on how to do that more effectively. But it's possible. And it could be really fun, particularly if you're playing with a very small group. You can dip into what is potentially other Rangers' abilities to make yourself and your group stronger. I have more build ideas, such as giving yourself a ton of armor or helping you do a ridiculous amount of damage. Stay tuned.